Chapter 1. The Stranger and the Mistaken Hug. Ethan Prescott steered his sleek Tesla through the winding streets of Selwood, Portland, the golden glow of sunset glimmering over the Willamette River on his left. The GPS announced in a soothing female voice, "You have arrived." He stopped in front of a small cedar-clad house. Modern, but not flashy. It wasn't the most expensive home he could have bought. Certainly not. But it was perfect, quiet, private, an ideal place to focus on his next big project. A data encryption software that could revolutionize the tech world. Or at least that was the hope. At 32, Ethan was a tech genius. The kind of man who sold his first startup at 25 and now had more money than he knew what to do with. But money couldn't buy silence, and silence was what he craved. His San Francisco penthouse was buried in car horns and endless parties. Selwood, with its tree-lined streets and cozy coffee shops, was his escape. No distractions, he muttered as he stepped out of the car and inhaled the crisp October air. Just me, my laptop, and 6 weeks to finish this design. The movers had come and gone, leaving his minimalist furniture, a leather couch, glass desk, and a bed more expensive than most people's cars, neatly arranged. Ethan unzipped his suitcase and pulled out the essentials: a coffee maker, a stack of programming books, and his noise-canceling headphones. He glanced out the large window overlooking the river, the water shimmering like liquid silver. This, he told himself, is paradise. Paradise lasted exactly 7 hours. At 9:47 p.m., Ethan was deep in a programming trance, fingers flying across the keyboard, when a sound shattered his concentration. A horribly off-key rendition of "Sweet Caroline" rang out into the night, followed by hyena-like laughter. He froze, the cursor blinking mockingly on the screen. "No," he whispered. "No way. Not here." Yanking off his headphones, he rushed to the window. Over the low wooden fence separating his yard from the neighbors, he saw a rundown house glowing with string lights. Shadows danced across the lawn, and the unmistakable thrum of a karaoke machine filled the air. Children giggled, dishes clinked, and, wait, was that the smell of cookies? Ethan clenched his jaw. He had moved to Portland for peace, not to live next door to a backyard talent show. He grabbed his phone, about to Google Selwood noise ordinance, when the singing stopped, replaced by applause and someone shouting, "June, it's your turn?" A bright, unpolished female voice launched into Dancing Queen. Ethan groaned. This was war. Throwing on his jacket, he stepped outside. The cool night air did nothing to soothe his frustration. The neighbor's backyard looked like a scene from a quirky indie film. A dozen people, young, old, and everything in between, sprawled across picnic blankets, a folding table piled high with snacks, and a wheezing karaoke machine on a sagging porch. In the center stood a young woman, probably mid-20s, belting ABBA with the energy of a Broadway star and the pitch of a smoke alarm. Her auburn ponytail bounced as she moved, her oversized sweater splattered with paint. Ethan grimaced. She was entirely too cheerful. He cleared his throat, ready to launch into a well-practiced speech about respecting shared spaces. But the woman, June, apparently spotted him. Her hazel eyes widened, and a radiant smile lit up her face. Before Ethan could react, she dropped the mic, bolted across the yard, and flung herself into his arms. "Uncle Ricky," she cried, wrapping him in a bear hug that smelled faintly of vanilla and acrylic paint. "You came? I knew you'd come." Ethan froze, arms stiff at his sides. The crowd went silent, all eyes on the scene. A little boy holding a juice box whispered, "Who's that guy?" An elderly woman on the porch squinted and murmured. Ricky got taller. "I'm not." Ethan started, but June clung tighter, her cheek pressed against his chest. Up close, she was a whirlwind of freckles and warmth, and for a second, he forgot how to speak. Then his brain rebooted. You've got the wrong guy." June pulled back, her hand still on his shoulders, blinking. "Wait, you're not Uncle Ricky?" She tilted her head, examining his face like a riddle. Then her expression shifted from confused to mortified, her cheeks flushing red. "Oh no, you're the new neighbor, aren't you?" "Ethan Prescott," he replied, brushing his jacket as if the hug had left a mark. And yes, I just moved in. I was hoping for a quiet night. The crowd erupted in laughter. The toothless kid shouted, "Miss June hugged the wrong guy." The old woman, probably June's grandmother, clapped and said, "Well, that's one way to say hello." June covered her face with both hands, peeking through her fingers. "I am so sorry. I thought you were my uncle. He's supposed to visit tonight. And I saw you in the dark. And, this is so embarrassing." She dropped her hands and gave a sheepish smile. "Let's try again. I'm June Bailey. Welcome to Selwood." Ethan stared at her, torn between irritation and an inexplicable urge to laugh. She looked like a kid caught stealing cookies. Earnest eyes and clumsy energy. "Next time, check for ID before tackling someone," he said, aiming for stern but landing closer to sarcastic. "Deal," June chirped, unfazed. She pointed toward the party. "Want to join? We've got snickerdoodles and terrible singing. Best combo in the neighborhood." "No thanks," Ethan replied coolly. "I have work to do. And for the record, some people appreciate quiet after 9 p.m. June's smile faltered, just for a second. "Got it, Mr. Prescott. I'll keep it down. Promise." She saluted playfully, then turned back to the group. "Okay, who's next? Let's give the new neighbor some peace." Ethan retreated to his house, applause in the first notes of course, Bohemian Rhapsody trailing behind him. He collapsed into his chair, glaring at his laptop. The code now looked like gibberish. His focus shattered. He rubbed his temples, trying to erase the memory of June's hug, her laugh, the scent of cookies clinging to her sweater. He opened a new email, drafting a firm but polite complaint to the Selwood Neighborhood Association about the noise. Then he deleted it. Too petty, even for him. Instead, he Googled soundproofing walls in Portland. If June Bailey thought she could derail his perfectly calibrated world with cookies and ABBA, she was sorely mistaken. And yet, as he lay in bed that night, the river murmuring outside the window, Ethan couldn't shake the image of her face. Those hazel green eyes, that goofy smile. He rolled over and punched his pillow. "Focus, Prescott," he muttered. "She's just a loud neighbor, nothing more." Across the fence, June was probably still singing, unaware that she had just upended the meticulously ordered world of a millionaire, with one mistaken hug. You're watching Soul Stories, where every tale whispers of love, healing, and hope. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, and that love often arrives when we least expect it, don't forget to subscribe and be part of our journey. Now stay with us. The story is just beginning. Chapter 2. The Noisy Neighbor Needs Training. Ethan Prescott woke up with the mood of a man whose sleep had been stolen. After last night's disastrous mistaken hug from June Bailey and her never-ending karaoke, he'd only managed a few hours of shut-eye. Bohemian Rhapsody kept looping in his head, like Freddie Mercury was performing live in his living room. He yanked open the curtains, and the gray drizzle of a typical Portland morning only worsened his irritation. "Today," he muttered, sipping black coffee, "I'm going to teach that noisy neighbor a lesson." Ethan wasn't the confrontational type. He preferred solving problems with scientific precision, just like writing code. June Bailey, with her ridiculous smile and chaotic energy, clearly needed training to understand that Selwood was not her personal stage. But he had no intention of banging on her door and picking a fight. Too uncivilized. Instead, he opted for a more strategic approach. Step 1. Research. Ethan opened his laptop and looked up Portland's noise regulations. Turns out, Selwood had a rather serious neighborhood association with an entire website full of complaint forms. He drafted a concise, polite letter. "Dear Association, I would like to report noise from 1423 Maple Street on the night of October 24th, including karaoke and loud laughter past 9 p.m. Please kindly remind residents to observe quiet hours." He hit send, satisfied, as if he'd just debugged a flawless line of code. Step 2. Defense. Ethan called a soundproofing company in East Portland and scheduled an appointment to install acoustic panels in his workspace. "I want the best," he said over the phone, glancing out at the low wooden fence, and June's house lit up with colorful hanging flower pots. "No sound should get through." The technician promised a visit in 2 days, and Ethan pictured himself soon encased in a fortress of silence. Step 3. Deterrent. He carefully typed and printed a sign. Neighborhood courtesy notice. Please keep noise to a minimum after 9 p.m. Thank you for your cooperation. He taped it to the lamppost directly in front of June's house, ensuring she'd see it on her way out. Perfect, he said to himself, dusting off his hands. If she didn't get the message now, she was beyond help. But June Bailey, it turned out, wasn't the kind of person who bowed to forms and rules. That afternoon, while Ethan was wrestling with an encryption algorithm, the doorbell rang. He frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Through the glass, he saw June standing there in a bright yellow raincoat, holding a plate covered with a cloth. Her auburn hair was soaked and clinging to her cheeks. But she beamed as if the rain were the best thing to happen all day. Ethan opened the door, his expression cold. Miss Bailey, what is it? Hi, Mr. Prescott, June chirped. I saw your notice. Very professional. But I thought I should apologize properly for last night, so I brought this. She lifted the plate and pulled back the cloth to reveal a golden apple pie, the warm scent of cinnamon and brown sugar drifting out. My grandma made it, but I helped knead the dough. Do you like apple pie? Ethan blinked, completely thrown off. He had braced for an argument, not pie. You think a pie makes up for keeping the entire neighborhood awake? He asked, arms crossed. June tilted her head, her smile undeterred. No, but I thought it might soften you up. Do you know your face scrunches up like a bracket when you're mad? Like this. She exaggerated his scowl so comically, he almost laughed. Almost. Miss Bailey, he said, trying to maintain sternness. I don't need pie. I need quiet. Did you read the notice? Sure did, very clear. Size 12 font, Times New Roman, classic office style, she replied, eyes twinkling. I promise I'll keep the volume down. But you know, this neighborhood's kind of lively. If you'd like, I can invite you to our outdoor movie night next week, as a peace offering. No thank you, Ethan cut in, taking the plate just to make her leave faster. I'm busy, and please respect the quiet hours. June nodded, but her eyes sparkled with something close to amusement. All right, Mr. Prescott, enjoy the pie, and if you want more, just knock. She turned and skipped through a puddle, her yellow raincoat glowing under the street lamp. Ethan shut the door and set the pie on the kitchen counter like it was a bomb. He had no intention of eating it. Who knew what she might have put in there? But the smell lingered. That night, when his stomach growled, he sliced off a piece, just one. It was so good he nearly moaned. Damn it, he muttered, cutting another slice. The war, it turned out, had only just begun. Over the next few days, Ethan escalated his training campaign. He sent another email to the association, this time complaining about children yelling on Saturday morning, a group of kids playing tag in June's yard. He added another layer of acoustic paneling to his office window, turning it into a soundproof bunker. He even bought a white noise machine and kept it running non-stop to drown out any trace of June. But June seemed entirely unfazed. One morning, he saw she'd hung a handmade sign right next to his notice. Hello, new neighbor. Come by for pie and a chat. Quiet hours, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., unless there's a party. Beneath it, a giant smiley face. Ethan growled and tore it down when no one was looking. Then one rainy afternoon, while he was reviewing project progress, a folded note slid through the fence slats. He picked it up and recognized June's bubbly handwriting. Mr. Prescott, I made banana bread today. Want a taste? P.S. Your white noise machine is louder than my karaoke. Attached was a paper bag holding 2 still warm slices of banana bread. Ethan stared at the bag, feeling like he was losing a battle he never meant to fight. This girl wasn't just noisy, she was unshakable. Every complaint, every rule, every soundproofing effort was met with smiles, pastries, and carefree charm that drove him mad. He stuffed the note in his pocket and resolved to return the bag. To make one thing clear, he was not her friend. But that night, sitting in his perfectly soundproofed room, white noise humming softly, Ethan felt a strange emptiness. His house was quiet, just the way he'd wanted. So why did it feel off? He glanced out the window, where light from June's porch spilled over the fence. There was no karaoke tonight, just the gentle patter of rain, and her silhouette painting something on the porch under the warm glow. Ethan shook his head and turned back to his laptop. "She's the problem," he muttered. But deep down he was starting to wonder if the real problem wasn't June, but the silence he once thought he needed. Chapter 3. One grandmother, 3 kids, and an art class under a tree. Ethan Prescott woke up in a world without power. His alarm didn't go off. The coffee maker sat lifeless. And his laptop, every programmer's lifeline, was nothing more than a dead chunk of plastic. Outside the window, Portland's sky was a moody gray, with a fine drizzle falling, and a temporary sign from the power company flapping on the lamppost. Outage for maintenance. Estimated restoration. 2 p.m., Ethan sighed and rubbed his face. Great. Now what? He had spent the past week reinforcing his anti-June fortress. The soundproof panels were installed, the white noise machine hummed smoothly, and he'd even rejected 3 more sweet treats June had passed over the fence, though he secretly ate 1 chocolate chip cookie and had to admit it was heartbreakingly good. But with no electricity, he couldn't work or hide in his precious silence cocoon. His stomach growled, and the fridge was empty. He'd forgotten to shop. "Fine," he muttered, throwing on a raincoat. "Let's find some coffee." Selwood was quiet that morning, with only a few joggers walking their dogs and the steady patter of rain on the sidewalk. Ethan aimed for a little coffee shop a few blocks away, the kind where he'd seen a few hipsters reading poetry. But as he passed June's house, he froze. Under the large maple tree in her front yard was an unexpected scene. June sat on a worn blanket, surrounded by 3 children, each holding a sheet of paper and a box of colored pencils. A small sign stuck in the grass read, "Free art class open to all dreamers." June was wearing a deep blue sweater, her hair tied up high, pointing at a drawing by a little girl with pigtails. "Awesome job, Mia. You drew this maple tree perfectly." Her voice was full of warmth, as if teaching art in the rain was the most natural thing in the world. The kids giggled and called her Miss Sunshine. Ethan, half hidden behind a shrub, held his breath without realizing it. This was June Bailey, the sleep-ruining, chaos-bringing neighbor, and now she was, what, saving the world? He was about to sneak away when a boy in an oversized hoodie spotted him. "Hey, who's that guy?" the boy yelled, pointing right at Ethan. June looked up, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Mr. Prescott," she called, waving enthusiastically. "Come join us." Ethan shook his head and raised a hand in refusal. "Just passing by. Don't want to interrupt." But before he could escape, an elderly woman with a hunchback and snow-white hair stepped out from June's porch, holding a tray of cookies. Dressed in a deep red cardigan, her eyes were cloudy but her smile gleamed. "Oh, you're June's old boyfriend, aren't you?" she said, her voice quivering. "From middle school? You used to bring her candy." Ethan's face turned crimson, like he'd just been dropped into the wrong sitcom. "No, ma'am. I think you've mistaken me. I'm her neighbor, Ethan Prescott. Just moved in." He glanced at June, waiting for her to correct the confusion, but she just covered her mouth, clearly holding back laughter. "Grandma, that's not Jake," she said, running over to help. "That's our new neighbor, remember? The one I hugged by accident?" Her grandmother squinted, then nodded thoughtfully. "Oh, right. You're much more handsome than Jake." She shoved a cookie into Ethan's hand before he could refuse. "Eat, dear. You're too thin." The kids burst out laughing. "Mia," the girl with pigtails yelled, "Miss Sunshine has a boyfriend." Ethan stood there awkward, holding the cookie. June shrugged with a guilty smile. "Grandma's a little forgetful, but she's sweet. Come on, sit down for a minute, Mr. Prescott. The kids love having new grown-ups around. It makes them feel special." Ethan wanted to say no. He really did. But there was something in June's eyes, warm and sincere, that disarmed him. He sat at the edge of the blanket, a little distance from the kids, trying to keep a neutral expression. "I don't draw," he said, nibbling the cookie, which of course was delicious. "I'm just observing." June smiled and turned back to the kids. "All right, today we're drawing something we love most. Who wants to go first?" A freckle-faced boy named Leo held up a drawing of a fluffy dog with big eyes. "This is Max, my dog. But he died." His voice was barely audible. June leaned down and hugged him gently. Max is beautiful, Leo. You drew him just right. I bet he's running around on a rainbow somewhere. Leo smiled, eyes misty. Ethan watched, forgetting his irritation. These kids weren't just noisy brats like he'd assumed. Mia lived with her grandma because her parents worked out of state. Leo had a single mom who worked a night shift at the supermarket. The third girl, Sarah, barely spoke at all, but her drawing a sunlit field of flowers made June cheer. Sarah, you're a genius with color. June wasn't just teaching art, she was making the kids feel seen. June's grandmother, seated nearby on a folding chair, began telling stories. When June was little, she drew on every wall in the house. I had to repaint 3 times. She looked at Ethan and winked. Have you seen her paintings? She won an award back in school? Ethan shook his head, unsure how to respond. He'd never imagined June as an actual artist, just a noisy girl in paint-stained sweaters. When the class ended, the kids gathered their things and ran into June's house for juice. June remained tidying up the crayons. Thanks for staying, she said, glancing up at Ethan. The kids love new faces. It makes them feel important. I didn't do anything, Ethan replied, standing and brushing off his pants. But, do you do this often? Teach for free? June nodded as if it were no big deal. Every week, if I have time. These kids need a place to dream, you know. Their lives aren't easy. She looked up, her eyes briefly shadowed with sadness before she smiled again. And you? What do you do in your soundproof fortress? Ethan hesitated. He wasn't used to talking about himself. I write software. Tech stuff? Boring things. He turned to go, but June stood and handed him a drawing from the class, a picture Mia had made. It showed a man with brown hair, in a serious expression, standing beside the maple tree. Mia drew you, June said with a chuckle. She said you look like a superhero, a grumpy one. Ethan stared at the drawing, a strange feeling stirring in his chest. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even a nice guy. But looking at June, with her paint-covered hands and open heart, he suddenly felt small. You're not as simple as I thought, he blurted out. June blinked, then laughed out loud. Mr. Prescott, that's the sweetest thing you've ever said. Keep the drawing. Maybe it'll help you frown less. She waved and ran inside after the kids, leaving Ethan under the maple tree, light rain dampening his shoulders. On the way home, Ethan slipped the drawing into his coat pocket, trying not to think too much. But the image of June, Miss Sunshine to the kids, the one who made both grandmothers and children smile, stuck with him. This noisy girl, it turned out, wasn't just a storm. She was a whole world he'd never known existed. Chapter 4: The Little Things That Make a Person. Ethan Prescott was not the kind of man who paid attention to his neighbors. In San Francisco, he had lived in a luxury high-rise for 3 years, without ever learning the name of the person across the hall. But June Bailey, with her radiant smile and habit of sneaking baked goods over the fence, was starting to unravel that life philosophy. Ever since the art class under the maple tree, her image, Miss Sunshine to the kids, the woman who made grandmothers and children laugh alike, lingered in his mind. He didn't want to admit it, but he'd started noticing her. Every morning, as Ethan sat by the window with his coffee, he watched June leave the house at 6:30 sharp, wearing her blinding yellow raincoat, pedaling an old bike down to a bakery a few blocks away. She worked the morning shift there, serving pastries and coffee to hipsters and office workers alike. Around noon, she returned home to wheel her grandmother out to the porch for some fresh air, and then she was off again, this time to a craft store where she sold handmade items in the afternoons. Ethan hadn't meant to track her schedule, of course not, but her house was in plain view, and he just happened to notice. He also noticed that June always smiled, even though her life wasn't exactly easy. Once he overheard her talking to her grandmother through the fence. "Grandmom, we've only got pasta this week, but I'm gonna make the best tomato sauce ever." Her voice was so cheerful it made eating noodles 5 days in a row sound like an adventure. Ethan, with his fridge full of organic groceries and an 8-digit bank account, couldn't wrap his head around how someone could be that happy. But what truly baffled him was her kindness. June didn't just care for her grandmother and run free art classes for kids. She also helped the elderly neighbor mow his lawn, delivered mail for an overworked single mom, and even picked up trash along the sidewalk just because, in her words, it looks nicer, and nice makes people happy. Ethan found himself wondering, where does she find the time? And more importantly, where does she get the energy to care so much about everyone? Then one morning, Ethan woke up with a pounding head and a throat like sandpaper. He rarely got sick. His lifestyle of kale smoothies and gym sessions 3 times a week usually kept him bulletproof. But Portland's damp chill had finally caught up with him. He lay slumped on the couch, laptop forgotten on the table, managing only to text his team that he'd be taking the day off. Outside, rain tapped steadily on the windows, and the gray sky only deepened his fatigue. By noon, the doorbell rang. Ethan dragged himself to answer it, hoping it was just a food delivery. But it wasn't. It was June, standing under his porch eave in a soaked raincoat, holding a plastic container. Her auburn hair clung to her cheeks, but her smile was brighter than the streetlights. "Hey, Mr. Prescott," she chirped. "I noticed you didn't come outside this morning, and my grandma said you look pale through the window. Are you sick?" Ethan frowned and tightened his robe. "I'm fine. Just a little under the weather. What do you want?" His voice came out hoarse, losing its usual icy edge. June held up the container. "Chicken soup. I made it this morning. Carrots, celery, and a little love. My grandma's recipe. This stuff will knock your cold right out." She winked, like soup was some kind of universal miracle. Ethan blinked, unsure what to say. He'd refused her apple pie, banana bread, and cookies. But chicken soup when he was actually sick. This was a new level of intrusion. "You didn't have to do that," he said, a little too sharply. "I can take care of myself." "I know you can," June replied without flinching, "but I wanted to. Take it, Mr. Prescott. Don't make me stand in the rain." She shoved the container through the fence when he opened the gate, then spun around and skipped through a puddle like a carefree kid. Ethan shut the door and stared at the container on his kitchen counter. He intended to shove it into the fridge and forget it, but the aroma of warm broth teased his stomach. "Just one spoonful," he muttered, heating it up in the microwave. One spoonful turned into one bowl, then 2. The soup was so good it nearly made him moan. "Damn it," he whispered. He almost wanted to call and thank her, but of course he didn't. Millionaires don't call about soup. That afternoon, with the fever easing, Ethan sat by the window, watching June on her porch. She was helping her grandmother adjust a flower pot that had been knocked over by the wind. The old woman said something that made June throw her head back in laughter, the sound ringing lightly across the fence. And Ethan realized he hadn't laughed like that in a very, very long time. The next day, feeling better, Ethan decided to return the container, not because he wanted to see June, of course not, but because he'd been raised to return things properly. He knocked on her door, container in hand, rehearsing a short thank you. June opened it in a paint-streaked sweater, brush in hand. "Mr. Prescott, you look less like death today," she said, as if he'd just returned from the grave. "Thanks for the soup," Ethan said, holding out the container. "It was good." He hesitated, then blurted, "Why did you help me? I mean, you're busy. Work, your grandma, the kids. Why bother with me?" June tilted her head, balancing the brush on her shoulder like a staff. She looked at him with a mix of mischief and something deeper. "Because I think the world needs more chicken soup than bug reports, Mr. Prescott. You fix machines with code. I fix people with soup, maybe." She grinned, and it lit up the porch more than any bulb ever could. Ethan stood there, unsure how to respond. Her words were simple, yet they hit a corner of his heart he'd long buried under ambition and work. "You're weird," he said, but there was no frost in his tone. "Let's go with unusual," June winked. "Want to see what I'm painting? It's for the kids. No karaoke, I promise." "No, I've got work," Ethan replied, turning to leave. But as he walked back, he felt oddly lighter, like her soup had melted more than just his fever. In the days that followed, Ethan continued to watch her, though he told himself it was just curiosity. He saw her biking through rain, delivering treats to kids, singing softly while cleaning her grandmother's windows. She didn't have money, She didn't have free time. But she had something Ethan, with all his success, didn't. A big heart stitched together from small things. One night sitting in his home office, Ethan opened his laptop and searched June Bailey online. He didn't expect to find much. She didn't seem like the digital type. But he stumbled on an old article in a local paper about a young art student who had won a painting contest in Portland. There was a photo of June, slightly younger, standing beside a vibrant painting. Her smile was exactly the same. Ethan closed the laptop, a strange feeling blooming in his chest. It felt like discovering a secret, and that secret was quietly pulling him closer to the noisy girl next door. Chapter 5. The Field Trip and a Smile He Couldn't Forget. Ethan Prescott was not a man who made impulsive promises. He was calculated, measured, someone who always weighed the cost before opening his wallet. And yet, in a moment of weakness, fueled by June Bailey's chicken soup, he had blurted out an offer to fund a bus for her art class's field trip. Just this once, he told himself as he signed the check, thinking it might stop her from shoving baked goods over the fence. What he didn't expect was that one small promise would pull him into a day full of chaos, laughter, and a version of June Bailey he'd never seen before. On Saturday morning, the Portland sky was unusually clear, not a drop of rain in sight. Ethan stood outside his house in a navy button-down and tailored slacks, looking more like he was headed to a board meeting than a children's outing. June had invited him to come along. Consider it a thank you for the bus. And although he meant to say no, the bright spark in her eyes had made him nod before he could think it through. Now he regretted it, especially as the yellow school bus pulled up in front of June's house, coughing out black smoke and squealing like a terrified cat. "Mr. Prescott," June shouted, jumping off the bus. She wore a t-shirt with a pine tree on it, ripped jeans, and a backward baseball cap. "Ready for a fun day?" Before he could answer, 3 kids, Mia, Leo, and Sarah, charged toward him, grabbing his arms. "Miss Sunshine says you're a superhero," Mia yelled, making Ethan stiffen. "I'm not," he began, but June winked and cut him off. "Hop on, superhero. We're headed to Tryon Creek Park." The bus rattled along suburban roads filled with laughter and the squeaky voices of singing children. June led the chorus with a ridiculous version of Wheels on the Bus, complete with lyrics about Miss Sunshine bouncing all around. Ethan sat in the back row, trying to maintain a neutral expression, but he kept glancing at June. She was playful, energetic, and the gravitational center of the chaos. When Leo asked if there were monsters in the forest, June replied, "Only cute ones, and they love cookies." The kids roared with laughter, and Ethan, despite himself, cracked a small smile. Tryon Creek Park was a lush, green wonderland, full of winding trails and the soft murmur of brooks. June led the group to a wide clearing and spread out picnic blankets, passing out peanut butter sandwiches. "Eat up or I'm confiscating them," she teased, stuffing one into Ethan's hand. He started to protest. He hadn't eaten peanut butter since elementary school, but her teasing eyes dared him. He took a bite. It was oddly good. Maybe it was the fresh air. Maybe it was her smile. After lunch, June organized a nature treasure hunt. She divided the kids into teams and gave them a list. Unusual leaves, strange rocks, and anything that looks like magic. Ethan was assigned as the official judge, a title he accepted with mock grumpiness but secret enthusiasm. He tagged along with Mia's team, watching as she picked up each leaf like it was gold. "Do you think this has magic in it?" she asked, holding up a brilliant red maple leaf. Ethan, awkward with kids, replied, Probably." Mia beamed, and something warm stirred in his chest. The highlight of the day came when everyone gathered under a giant oak tree, and June told a fairy tale. Not your typical kind. She rewrote Cinderella as a baker in sneakers, and turned the prince into a guy who fixed bikes. And they lived happily ever after, running their bakery together, she declared, raising her arms like a theater actress. The kids erupted in applause. Ethan, leaning against the tree, felt light. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about code or deadlines or the hum of white noise. He just listened to June's laughter, watched sunlight dance through the leaves, and felt peace. But the day couldn't stay perfect forever. On the ride back, the bus jolted violently and came to a stop on a dirt road. The driver, a burly man with a thick beard, stepped out and muttered, "Flat tire. Gotta change it." The kids grew anxious, whispering about being stuck in the woods. June clapped her hands. "No worries. We're a team of superheroes, remember? Who wants to sing for our driver?" She launched into "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," and the kids joined in, the tension easing. Ethan, not one to sit idly, took off his blazer and stepped out. "I'll help," he said, his voice firm. The driver raised an eyebrow at his expensive clothes. "You sure, kid?" "It's gonna get messy." Ethan shrugged. "I used to fix bikes. A bus can't be that different." He dove in, hands getting greasy, sweat running down his brow. June stood nearby, handing him tools and cheering like a one-woman pep squad. "Look at Mr. Prescott go. Strong as the Hulk," she hollered, making the kids cheer. When the tire was finally changed, the whole group applauded. Ethan stood up, wiping his hands on his now filthy shirt, feeling more satisfied than he ever had finishing a tech project. June looked at him, her smile glowing. "You don't look much like a billionaire right now," she teased, but her eyes were full of admiration. Ethan laughed. A real laugh, not just a polite smirk. "You don't look like a regular art teacher either," he replied. For the first time, he felt completely at ease talking to her. June winked, then turned to help the kids board the bus, leaving Ethan standing there, heart beating a little faster. On the ride home, the kids fell asleep, heads leaning on each other. June sat beside Ethan at the front, quietly doodling in a sketch pad. He peeked over. It was a quick sketch of him, holding a wrench next to the bus, labeled "Tire Change Superhero." "You draw fast," he said, trying to sound casual. "Only when I see something worth drawing," June replied without looking up, though her lips curved into a smile. Ethan turned to the window, pretending to watch the trees. But her smile, that unforgettable smile, was already imprinted in him. When the bus dropped them off in front of June's house, it was already dark. The kids were picked up by their parents and June waved at Ethan. "Thanks for today, superhero," she said softly. "Next time, I'm dragging you on a leaf hunting mission." Ethan shook his head, but his mouth betrayed him with a grin. "Don't count on it, Bailey." He walked home, his shirt stained with grease, hair a mess, but his heart felt strangely light. In his quiet office, Ethan opened his laptop, but instead of diving into code, he looked out the window, toward the fence, where the light from June's house still glowed. For the first time, he didn't turn on the white noise machine. For once, he wanted to hear, just a little, the living, breathing sound of her world. Still following the story? If this story found you outside of Soul Stories, we invite you home, to where every touching tale begins with truth, hope, and heart. Chapter 6. June's Secret. Ethan Prescott never imagined he would fall in love. He was a man of logic, algorithms, and 5-year plans. Love to him was an uncontrollable variable, like a stubborn bug in the code you couldn't debug. But ever since the field trip to Tryon Creek, June Bailey's smile, that radiant, mischievous, sincere smile, had become an infinite loop in his mind. He didn't want to admit it, but every time he saw her biking through the rain, softly singing as she cared for her grandmother or painting with the kids, his heart skipped a beat. This morning, Ethan sat in his home office, the window open to let in the rare Portland sunshine that spilled gold across his desk. He should have been focused on his software project. Its deadline loomed, but instead his eyes drifted to the wooden fence. June was in the yard, kneeling beside a flower pot, hands covered in soil as she chatted with her grandmother. The old woman nestled in her wheelchair laughed as June told her something, likely a silly story about the kids. Ethan found himself smiling before he realized it. "Focus, Prescott," he muttered, slamming the laptop shut. But he knew he'd lost. He was in love with her. The feeling was strange and terrifying. Ethan had never loved anyone, not like this. He had dated women in San Francisco with glossy hair and even glossier resumes. But they were like business transactions. Nothing ever touched his heart. But June was different. She had none of the things that usually impressed him. No wealth, no fame. Yet she had everything he didn't. Unconditional kindness, vibrancy, and a world full of color that he was only beginning to discover. Wanting to understand her better, Ethan returned to the old newspaper article he'd found the week before, about the art student who had once won a major contest in Portland. He dug deeper, searching social media and local archives. A picture began to form, not on canvas, but in June's life story. She had been a top student at a prestigious art school in Seattle, recipient of a full scholarship, every young artist's dream, but 4 years ago, she dropped out. No explanation, just a line in the records, left for personal reasons. Ethan frowned. Something was missing. He decided to ask June's grandmother, Mrs. Rosemary, the woman who seemed to know everything but rarely got the details right. That afternoon, while June was at work, he knocked on her door, armed with a box of cookies, a trick he'd picked up from June herself. Mrs. Rosemary opened the door, her cloudy eyes lighting up. "Jake, no, wait, you're Ethan, right?" she said, beaming. "Yes, I'm Ethan," he replied, trying not to blush. "I brought cookies. Mind if I sit and chat for a bit?" She invited him in. The little house smelled of apple pie and oil paint. In the kitchen, she made tea and rambled about her youth before suddenly shifting to June. "That girl was a star, you know. Her paintings hung in the city's gallery," she said with pride. "But then I had a stroke. And June, she gave it all up. The scholarship, the school, everything. Just to come home and take care of me." She exhaled, eyes misty. "I told her to keep going, but she said, 'You're my home, Grandma.'" Foolish girl. Ethan sat silently, like he'd been punched in the chest. June had sacrificed her dream, a dream thousands would die for, just to care for her grandmother. He thought of his own life, the money, the success, the things he had built. But he had never given anything without calculating the cost. He had created a tech empire, but never a home. Not like June, who had turned this little house into a place filled with warmth and love. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking of June. She worked 2 jobs, cared for her grandmother, taught children, and still laughed like life was a vibrant painting. He felt small, not because he lacked money or titles, but because he had never truly known what it meant to give without expectation. June wasn't just his noisy neighbor. She was a lesson he had never learned. The next morning, an idea struck him. He wanted to do something for June. Not out of gratitude, but because she deserved to feel seen. He remembered what Mrs. Rosemary had said about June's artwork, and the sketch she had drawn of him at Tryon Creek. The tire-change superhero. June was an artist, yet she had never been given a real chance to shine. Ethan decided to organize her very first art exhibition. He got to work immediately. He reached out to a small gallery in the Alberta Arts District, a place known for promoting local talent. The owner, an older woman named Clara with silver hair, agreed to donate the space if Ethan covered the expenses. "I like the sound of this," Clara said over the phone. "An undiscovered artist finally getting her moment. It's very Portland." Ethan also hired a design team to make posters and contacted local media to ensure the event would draw attention. But there was one issue: the paintings. June didn't have many finished pieces. She mostly sketched for the kids or doodled while caring for her grandmother. So Ethan launched a covert operation. He began secretly collecting the pieces she'd left behind at her art classes. Sketches the kids gave back to her, or drawings she made while waiting outside. He enlisted Mia, Leo, and Sarah to help. "Don't tell Miss Sunshine," he whispered, feeling like a clumsy spy. The kids were thrilled, calling him Mr. Art Show Superhero. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan worked nonstop. He selected 10 pieces, scenes from everyday life, the maple tree in Selwood, children laughing, a radiant portrait of Mrs. Rosemary. Each piece bore June's signature style: bold, bright colors, free-flowing strokes, and a touch of innocence that tugged at his heart. He also found an older painting Mrs. Rosemary had hidden in a cabinet. One June had entered in that long-ago art contest. It was a moonlit field of wildflowers, full of depth and talent. The date for the exhibit was set. Ethan invited June, telling her it was a community event he was sponsoring. He lied, saying it was a local art show and she should come see it. June, as always, agreed enthusiastically. "Anything involving art sounds fun," she said, eyes sparkling. Ethan smiled, heart racing. hoping she would love the surprise. But deep down he worried. June lived for others? Would she accept the spotlight for herself? He remembered her words. The world needs more chicken soup than Era reports. He wanted this exhibit to be a bowl of soup for her, a gift to show that her talent mattered. But he also feared. If she found out he had gone through her sketches without asking, would she be angry? The night before the show, Ethan stood in his office, gazing out the window. June was on her porch, painting under the warm porch light, softly humming a folk song. He smiled, feeling like the world had shrunk to that exact moment. He didn't just love June. He wanted to belong in the world she built. A world made of kindness, color, and the little things that make a person whole. Chapter 7. Beneath the Porch Light. June Bailey sat on her porch under the warm glow of golden string lights, a cup of hot cocoa in one hand and her sketchbook in the other. Night in Selwood was quiet, just the chirping of crickets and the breeze rustling through the maple tree. She had just finished her evening art class. The kids had gone home, and Grandma Rosemary was fast asleep inside. June usually loved these moments, when she could draw, hum softly, and let her thoughts wander. But tonight she couldn't draw. Her mind kept drifting to Ethan Prescott, the grumpy neighbor who had somehow become a part of her world. She heard footsteps, then spotted Ethan on the other side of the fence, holding a small flashlight like he was patrolling the neighborhood. "Mr. Prescott," she called out playfully, "hunting ghosts, or just checking if I've got karaoke going again?" Ethan jumped, nearly dropping the flashlight, making June burst into laughter. "I was just taking a walk," he said, slightly embarrassed. "You're still up?" "Yeah, it's too beautiful a night to waste," she said, motioning to the folding chair beside her. "Have a seat. I don't bite. I've got hot cocoa if you want some." Ethan hesitated, then stepped through the gate and sat down, keeping a respectful distance. June handed him a mug, and he took it like it was some kind of foreign tech gadget. "Thanks," he muttered, taking a cautious sip, then wincing from the heat. June giggled. "Not used to sweet stuff, huh? Let me guess. You're a black coffee, no sugar kind of guy. Very tech billionaire." Ethan smirked, for once not denying it. "You're probably right, but this isn't bad." He looked at her, his eyes softer than usual, and June felt her heart stumble a bit. She didn't know why, but she wanted to understand him, the man who always kept himself behind an invisible wall. "What were you like growing up?" June asked, her voice curious. "I mean, before you became the tech tycoon. Did you ever climb trees or do anything ridiculous?" She tilted her head, expecting him to shut down the conversation. But Ethan stared into his mug, then began to speak, his voice low and steady. "I grew up in a small town near Denver," he said. "My parents worked in a factory. We didn't have much. I was the quiet kid, always in my room, tinkering with old computers my dad brought home. I liked taking them apart, figuring out how to make them faster." He paused, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But I didn't have many friends. The other kids called me Bookworm. One time I tried to climb a tree to prove I wasn't weak. Fell and broke my arm. After that, I decided the indoors were safer." June listened, picturing a younger Ethan, messy hair, determined eyes, a cast on his arm. "So you'd loved machines from the start," she said gently. "But you know what? I think that kid was brave. He fell out of a tree and still went on to build an empire. Not bad, Mr. Prescott." Ethan looked at her, and for a moment, something unguarded flickered in his gaze. "You always see the bright side of everything, don't you?" he asked. "What about you? Life hasn't been easy, but you? You're like sunshine. How do you do it?" June shrugged, placing her cocoa down and twirling a pencil between her fingers. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted, her voice light but honest. "I grew up here in Selwood. It was just me and Grandma. My mom passed away when I was little. Dad disappeared. Some days all we had was bread and butter, and I wore my grandma's old sweaters to school." She glanced at him, her eyes glowing with a quiet resilience. "But she used to say, 'June, if you smile, the whole world lights up.' I believed her. So I smiled. I painted. I sang. I cared for her. Because those things made life feel worth it." She exhaled slowly. When I got that art scholarship, I dreamed of galleries in cities. But then Grandma had her stroke, and I chose to stay. Not because I'm noble, but because she's my home. I don't regret it. I find small joys, like kids laughing in class, or you finishing my chicken soup. She winked, making Ethan blush. You're never sad, he asked softly. Oh, I am, she said. But sadness is like rain. It comes, it goes. The important part is planting flowers after it leaves. And see, I've got a whole garden here. She pointed to a flower pot near the porch and grinned. Ethan looked at her, saying nothing, but she could feel the shift in him. He was no longer the neighbor building soundproof walls. He was the man who listened, who brought her herbal tea when she had a cold, who changed a bus tire in the rain. She remembered how he'd laughed at trying Krieg, how he carefully kept Mia's drawing, and how he now sat beside her, sharing pieces of his past. He wasn't perfect, but he was real, and her heart stirred, like a new line on a canvas. You know, June said teasingly, I used to think you were the silent type who hated everything fun. But you're kinda, okay, like hot cocoa, strange at first, but it grows on you. Ethan chuckled, a rare, unguarded laugh that made June want to hear it again and again. You're not so bad yourself, Bailey, he said, his eyes catching the porch light. They sat there talking until the cocoa cooled and stars sparkled above Portland. June told him about the time she painted an entire wall in her room, and Ethan confessed to hacking a video game to gift a friend in school. They laughed, they sat in silence, and in that moment, the fence between them seemed to disappear. As Ethan stood to leave, June gently caught his hand for a second. Thanks for talking, Ethan, she said, calling him by name for the first time. Next time I'll bake an apple pie. Ethan smiled, her hand still warm in his. I'll hold you to that, he said, then walked away, the porch lights casting his shadow across the fence. June stayed behind, picking up her pencil and sketching a new outline. A man with a quiet smile standing beneath the stars. She didn't know he was planning an art exhibit just for her, but she knew one thing for sure. Ethan wasn't just a neighbor. He was someone she wanted to keep. In the picture of her life. Chapter 8, A Heart Needs to be Called by Its True Name. Ethan Prescott stood in the small Alberta gallery, his heart thudding like a program stuck in an infinite era loop. Strings of golden lights hung from the ceiling, illuminating 10 of June Bailey's paintings against pristine white walls. Each canvas, ranging from a moonlit field of flowers to a beaming portrait of Grandma Rosemary, told a story about Selwood, about kindness, about the woman who had made his heart skip beats. The modest crowd of local artists, journalists, and neighbors murmured appreciatively. Dressed in a deep blue suit, Ethan tried to appear calm, but he was more nervous than the day he pitched his first startup. He had done everything to make this exhibit perfect. He'd hired Clara, the gallery owner, to design the space. He'd contacted local media to secure a feature in Portland Monthly. He'd even sworn the kids, Mia, Leo, and Sarah, to secrecy, telling them this was just a community art event. June had accepted the invitation with her usual cheerful smile. Art means joy. I wouldn't miss it. But she didn't know this was her exhibit. When June walked in, Ethan felt time pause. She wore a simple green dress, her auburn hair loosely tied back, and her eyes sparkled as she looked around. This place is amazing, Mr. Prescott, she exclaimed, tugging his arm. Who's the artist? I want to meet them. Ethan smiled and led her to the first painting, a maple tree in Selwood, drawn in her unmistakable strokes. Take a look, he said, voice slightly shaking. June tilted her head and froze. Her eyes widened, her lips parted slightly. She moved from one painting to the next, recognizing every line, every hue. These are mine, she whispered, turning to Ethan. How? When did you? Her voice trembled with surprise and emotion, her eyes glistening. The crowd began clapping as Clara stepped forward to announce, Welcome to the debut exhibit of June Bailey, Portland's hidden gem. June covered her mouth, laughing through her tears. She hugged Clara, then turned to Ethan, gripping his hand. I don't even know what to say. Thank you. Really. Ethan's heart nearly melted. He wanted to tell her she deserved the world, that her art needed to be seen, but all he managed was a bashful smile. "You deserve it, Bailey." But the joy didn't last. As June walked past the gallery entrance, her smile faded. She stopped in front of one of the promotional posters, an image of a group painting she'd made for the kids, Mia, Leo, and Sarah, smiling beneath a maple tree. Underneath was a bold caption, "The June Bailey Exhibit, sponsored by Prescott Technologies, innovating communities through art." Ethan's company logo was printed in the corner. June turned, her gaze sharp. "Where did you get that painting?" she asked, voice calm but cold. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. The kids gave it to me. I thought it was beautiful, so—" "That painting was for them," she interrupted, her hand tightening. "Not for display. And what is this? Innovating communities? You used my art to promote your company?" Her voice shook, not with sadness, but with fury. The crowd fell silent. A few guests drifted away to avoid the tension. Ethan's heart pounded. "No, June, it's not like that," he stammered. "I just wanted to help. I thought this exhibit would be good for you. I didn't mean it as self-promotion." But his words felt weak, like a broken string of code that wouldn't compile. He hadn't asked her permission. He hadn't stopped to think that she might feel used. He only wanted her to shine. But now he saw, he'd made her feel exploited. June shook her head, her eyes red with unshed tears. "You don't get it, Mr. Prescott. Those paintings aren't just images. They're pieces of me, of the kids, of my grandmother. You took them without asking." She turned and walked out, leaving Ethan frozen, hands cold. The crowd eventually dispersed. Clara patted his shoulder gently. "She'll be okay, she just needs time." But Ethan didn't feel okay. He returned home to a house that now felt like a mausoleum. He sank onto the sofa, staring at the wooden fence through the window. June's house was dark. She wasn't home, or maybe she just didn't turn on the lights. His white noise machine sat silent in the corner, but for once, silence wasn't comforting. It was empty. It was as if June had taken all of Selwood's light with her. Ethan opened his laptop and pulled up the emails from his communications team. There it was. They had added the logo and slogan without telling him, thinking it was a perfect PR opportunity. He'd been too busy managing the event to double-check the designs. "Idiot," he muttered, slamming his fist on the desk. He wanted to call June, to explain, but he didn't have her number. He thought of knocking on her door, but what if it just made things worse? He wrote a note instead, awkward, scrawled, and slipped it through the fence. "June, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Please let me explain." He didn't know if she'd read it, but it was all he could do. The day dragged on. Ethan couldn't focus on anything. Every noise outside, a bicycle, a child's voice, made his heart jump. But June didn't appear. He sat in his office, staring at the sketch she had drawn of him. Tire change superhero. Now all he saw was a blank space where her laughter used to echo. He had found her, a burst of sunlight in his structured world. And now he feared he'd lost her, because he didn't know how to call her heart by its true name. But he wouldn't give up. June deserved more than a note through the fence. She deserved a real apology. She deserved someone who would listen, without trying to fix her, without turning her art into a platform. For the first time in his life, Ethan Prescott didn't want to debug a system or launch a product. He just wanted to make things right. And keep the light that June Bailey had brought into his life. You're watching Soul Stories, exclusive to our channel. If you're still with us, drop a comment. We read and cherish them all. Subscribe to support more heartfelt original stories. Thanks for being part of the Soul Stories family. Chapter 9. The Second Hug. No mistake this time. Ethan Prescott had never felt his house so empty. 3 days had passed since the disastrous art exhibit in Alberta, and June Bailey had vanished from sight. No more glimpses of her biking through the rain. No more soft humming drifting over the fence. No more sweet treats tucked through the slats of weathered cedar. He had left a note, stopped by the bakery and the craft store. But it was as if June had evaporated. Grandma Rosemary had only said, "The girl needs time, young man." Ethan knew he had been wrong, but June's silence wasn't just a punishment. It was a void carved deep in his chest. He sat in his office, staring at the sketch from Tryon Creek. Tire change superhero in her messy handwriting. The loose, playful strokes were a reminder of when he'd first started opening up. He had come to Selwood looking for peace, but June had given him something more. Life, laughter, a reason to become a better man. He couldn't lose her, not over a mistake he could make right. The opportunity came on a Friday evening. Ethan heard cheerful noise outside and peeked through the window. The whole Selwood neighborhood had gathered on June's front lawn for an outdoor movie night. String lights sparkled overhead, a picnic table overflowed with cookies and lemonade, and Mia, Leo, and Sarah ran in loops across the grass giggling. June, in her familiar forest green sweater, adjusted the projector, chatting with neighbors. She smiled, but not like before. Ethan could see it. Her joy was dimmer, her spark tucked behind her eyes. This was his last chance. He took a deep breath, ditched the blazer for a simple shirt, and walked outside. No script, no polished speech, just his heart. As he crossed the lawn, the kids spotted him first. "Mr. Superhero," Mia squealed, grabbing his hand. June looked up. Their eyes locked. She froze. Her smile faded, but she didn't turn away. Ethan's pulse thumped in his ears, but he didn't stop. "Hi, everyone," he said, his voice just a little shaky. The crowd hushed. Curious eyes turned to him, the quiet tech guy rarely seen at block parties. I'm not great at speaking in public," Ethan admitted, "but I need to say something, and I need June to hear it." He turned toward her fully, locking onto her amber-green gaze. "June, I messed up. I organized the art exhibit because I wanted the world to see how brilliant you are. But I didn't ask you. I took your paintings that meant something to you and the kids, and used them without your permission. And I made you feel used. I didn't mean to promote my company, but it happened. That was my fault. I should have been more careful. I'm sorry." The crowd murmured softly. Some nodded. June stood still, clutching her sweater strings tightly. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice like it was just between the two of them. "I came to Selwood for silence, but instead I found life. You gave me that, June. You showed me the world isn't just code and deadlines. You taught me how to laugh, how to care, how a bowl of chicken soup can change everything." He smiled faintly, remembering the first night. "That hug you gave me by mistake. It changed something in me. I don't deserve you, but I want to make this right. You're the sunshine of Selwood, and I just want to stand somewhere in your light." A beat of silence. Then Grandma Rosemary clapped, shouting, "Well said, young man." The kids cheered. Even Sarah, usually quiet, giggled brightly. June stared at him, eyes glimmering with unshed tears. And then she stepped forward. Before he could react, she burst out laughing, clear and bright, like sun after rain. "Mr. Prescott," she said teasingly, "you really know how to command a neighborhood's attention." And then she opened her arms and pulled him into a hug, a real one. A warm, tight, vanilla and paint-scented hug that made Ethan feel like the world had narrowed down to that one perfect moment. This time, she whispered against his shoulder, "I know who I'm hugging." Ethan wrapped his arms around her, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The neighborhood exploded into applause, someone whistled, and Leo yelled, "Now kiss." June laughed, stepping back, cheeks flushed. "Easy, kid," she joked, but her eyes stayed on Ethan's, soft and shining. The movie started. The Secret Garden, a classic the kids had picked. June and Ethan sat side by side on a picnic blanket, shoulders touching. She handed him a cup of lemonade and whispered, "You still owe me a much longer explanation, but for now, you're forgiven." Ethan grinned, his chest loosening. "I'd trade 1,000 lines of code to make you chicken soup every day," he said. She laughed again, his favorite sound. As the film ended, neighbors stayed behind, chatting beneath the lights. June told Ethan about the movie nights, her way of making the neighborhood feel like family. He looked at Rosemary, surrounded by kids, storytelling with her whole heart, and for the first time he understood. Family isn't just blood, it's the people you choose to love. Weeks later, a simple gathering unfolded in June's backyard, a neighborhood party to celebrate June and Ethan, two people who'd found each other through a mistaken hug. The long wooden table overflowed with apple pie, banana bread, and chicken soup, all made by June and Grandma Rosemary. The kids painted a giant banner, Mr. Superhero plus Miss Sunshine equals forever. Ethan, in a t-shirt instead of a suit for once, laughed and hugged Mia, Leo, and Sarah tightly. June stood beside him, her green dress glowing under the golden sunset. She handed him a small sketch, the two of them standing hand in hand beneath a Selwood maple tree. "Thank you for staying, Ethan," she said softly. "Not just in Selwood, but in my world." Ethan held her paint-speckled fingers and smiled. "Thank you for messing mine up, June." He kissed her forehead gently. The neighborhood cheered. Rosemary wiped tears, and Leo shouted, "Told you they'd kiss?" Laughter echoed through the yard, carried by birdsong and a breeze rustling the old maple leaves. As the golden evening light bathed Selwood, Ethan looked around. June, Rosemary, the kids, the neighbors, who had become family. He thought of his quiet mansion, once mistaken for heaven. Now he knew. Heaven wasn't silence. Heaven was life. June's laughter. Vibrant paintings and the small moments that make a heart whole. Ethan Prescott, a millionaire who once only knew how to write code, had finally learned how to love, not with wealth or reputation, but with every small, beautiful moment June Bailey had taught him to see. And their story didn't end here. June kept painting, teaching, and baking. Ethan still coded, but now he also joined movie nights, fixed flat tires, and even tried sketching, though June insisted his drawings look like spaghetti. They didn't promise forever. They promised to live, to laugh, and to love. Starting with a second hug. This time, no mistake,